talk about, but there's a lot of political news. We've been talking about, of course, the situation of the Palm Party in the last, years, but particularly it's aggravated in the last couple of days. If you listened to our last edition of Imagen News, we provided you an analysis, at least what we thought was going on. But there's other news out there that we need to talk about, and one that is making a lot of headlines, and will be making headlines at least in the next 24 hours, has to do with a man named Edgar Tamayo Arias, who's apparently, it appears, is going to be executed in the state of Texas. He received capital punishment for having killed a policeman. He was convicted, and despite the efforts of the Mexican government and some NGOs to stop the execution, the bottom line is in Texas, they believe in the capital punishment. And two, even though the Mexican government may have some valid arguments in terms of what international law says, this Mexican citizen did not receive access to consular services, who perhaps could have helped him in his defense. In addition to the fact that he apparently, according to some of the news reports, has a mild mental incapacity. Despite all these facts and despite some decisions by the international courts, it appears that Texas is going to move forward with this execution. And of course, we're going to be hearing a lot about this, I believe, don't you? Guillermo Garcia on the line. He's been joining us throughout the years. He's a talented young lawyer. He right now is receiving his PhD at Harvard Law School, his doctorate in law at Harvard Law School, and he follows these types of cases very, very closely. Guillermo, welcome to the show. And could you just briefly explain to us why the Mexican government thought that they potentially could have a case before the Texas justice system?
Hi, Ana Maria. I think the key fact here is that we have to go back a little bit, all the way to 2005. In 2005, the Mexican government won a case against the United States in the International Court of Justice, where basically the International Court of Justice said to the United States that they had to review and reconsider several cases where Mexicans had been found guilty and they were going to be executed in the United States, although their consular rights were violated in the process. Now, as you know, in the United States, many of these decisions from the international tribunals are not immediately self-executing in terms of domestic law. Mm-hmm. So what happened in 2005 was Mexico tried to bring a claim in domestic courts, arguing that they have won the case, and the domestic courts, because state courts, had to review and reconsider these cases. And in fact, the case ended up in the United States Supreme Court, and the United States Supreme Court ended up saying, unfortunately, yes, it might be a violation of international law. Yes, the United States has to comply with the decision. But in terms of U.S. domestic law, we cannot force state courts to comply with the decision.
Well,
and in fact, even George Bush, you remember, issued a memo ordering particularly the Texas court to review and reconsider the decision. You remember the case of Ernesto Medellin,
right,
who was the first one to be executed. And the Texas Supreme Court said, we have no obligation to follow George Bush memorandum because we have our own legal system and all the resources for these individuals were finished. So they executed, in that case, Ernesto Medellin, and then 2 years later, another Mexican was in the list of the International Court of Justice decision, and Humberto Leal was also executed in 2011.
But
so things haven't changed.
Let me ask you this. Let me stop you, because I think this is important, because I've been hearing even the legal advisor from Foreign Relations argue that in fact the federal government, the U.S. federal government, does have jurisdiction and somehow could be able to stop the execution despite the decision of the Texas, but despite the state of Texas decision to execute this man. So, but my understanding is they really can't do very much, right?
No, actually, the Supreme Court was very clear. The U.S. Supreme Court was very clear and said, that it wasn't the executive, in this case the president, who could force the state legislators to do, the state courts to do something. Mm-hmm. They had to appeal to the U.S. Congress so that the U.S. Congress would pass legislation implementing the decisions from the International Court of Justice, or even the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations.
Which would never pass in the U.S. government, right? I mean, that would just never pass.
It never passed.
Yeah, no.
Exactly. It never passed, and advocates and NGOs were trying to lobby in the U.S. Congress at that time, 2008, 2009. There was a lot of lobbying happening. And then it stopped, and then things haven't changed. So, even though President Obama tried to issue another memorandum, tried to politically move something, like pressure state courts to do differently. But the situation, there's nothing that could happen differently from George Bush, and in that case, even it was easier. George Bush, he was a Republican. He understood the situation in Texas. He was the governor of Texas at the time, and he was unable to convince state courts to comply with the decision of the International Court of Justice. Yeah. So things haven't changed, and I'm really surprised, that people were expecting this time to be differently.
Right. Well, it's unless something dramatic happens, and it has to be very dramatic. The likelihood is that this Mexican citizen Edgar Tamayo Arias will be executed for the murder of a policeman. And of course, this may or may not be an issue during these trilateral meetings. As you know, the president's going to be all three presidents. Well, three leaders of NAFTA are going to be meeting in February. So I wonder if this is also an issue that's going to be brought up, just to put a little bit more icing on the cake of difficulties that the bilateral relationship between Mexico and the United States find themselves at this point. So I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much, Guillermo.
Thank you, Ana Maria, and greetings from Harvard.
Thank you so much. Do you have a Twitter account if people want to be in touch with you?
Yes, my Twitter account is Guillermo J. Garci.
Mm-hmm. So that's it's
without the A at the end.
Okay, excellent. At Guillermo J. Garci. Okay, thank you so much, Guillermo. That was Guillermo Garcia. He is a PhD candidate at Harvard Law School. He also has an LLM in international law at Fletcher at Harvard and at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. Thanks so much. We're going to go to commercial break. Please don't go away. I'm Ana Maria Salazar, and I'll be right back.
You're listening to Imagen News with Ana Maria Salazar.